Have you ever had someone pull away from you just as things started to feel emotionally close? Maybe they seemed open at first, attentive, interested, even affectionate. And then, something shifted. Their energy changed. They stopped responding the same way. They became distant, hard to reach, vague about their feelings. You were left wondering what happened. Did you say something wrong? Were you too much? Or was this just another person afraid of commitment? Here's the part that no one talks about sometimes when an avoidant person pulls away. It's not because they don't care, it's because they do, and they don't know how to handle it. I'm Jim Rohn, and in this video, I want to help you see the truth beneath the behavior that's confused and hurts so many people. Because sometimes the thing you thought was fear, distance, or rejection is actually their most vulnerable expression of love. It's just trapped beneath layers of emotional armor. Avoidant people don't express affection the way most securely attached individuals do, where you might reach out, open up, or get closer. They shut down. Their system is wired to interpret emotional intimacy as something dangerous. So ironically, the more they care, the more uncomfortable they often become. And when those feelings start to rise, real feelings, they don't say "I love you." They don't move forward. They deactivate, they run, or they go quiet. And in that moment, you feel abandoned. But what's actually happening is they're overwhelmed by their own capacity to feel something real. That doesn't mean the behavior is okay. It doesn't make it healthy. But it does explain why you might be stuck trying to read between the lines, asking, is this fear? Or was there love here? In this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly how to recognize that moment when an avoidant person is actually showing you their version of love, even if it's in a backward, self-protective way. And more importantly, I'll teach you how to respond not with chasing or fixing, but with emotional clarity and boundaries that protect your peace. So if you've ever felt like you were being punished for being loved too closely, this video is for you. Don't let confusing behavior rob you of your clarity. Subscribe now and stay with me to the end. Because once you understand what's really happening behind avoidance, you'll stop blaming yourself and start choosing the love you deserve. One of the most painful and confusing experiences in any relationship is being met with distance right after closeness. You have a moment of intimacy. Maybe it's a deep conversation, a vulnerable confession, or even a meaningful night together, and then suddenly they change. The person who once seemed open begins pulling away. They stop texting as much. They take longer to respond. The warmth you felt just days ago fades into a cold silence, and you're left wondering, what just happened? Was it something I said? Did I misread everything? But here's what most people don't realize. Avoidant withdrawal isn't a lack of caring. It's often the opposite. It's what happens when someone who does care begins to feel more than they know how to hold. For avoidant individuals, intense emotional intimacy doesn't feel grounding. It feels threatening. Their nervous system is wired not for closeness, but for self-preservation. And that wiring usually stems from early life experiences where vulnerability was unsafe, neglected, or punished. Imagine being a child who needed comfort, affection, or emotional connection, and being met with silence, shame, or even subtle withdrawal from a parent. Over time, that child learns that needing others is risky, that expressing emotions leads to disappointment or pain. So as they grow into adults, love doesn't feel like warmth. It feels like walking into a storm without protection. The closer they get to someone, the more exposed they feel, and rather than leaning in, they pull back hard. This is what's happening when an avoidant withdraws after emotional closeness. It's not about you being too much, it's not even about disinterest. It's about emotional overload. They may not even be fully aware of it. But something inside them, deep in their unconscious, says, "This is dangerous. I need to retreat." And so they do. Their withdrawal is not strategic. It's reactive. It's a learned survival response. It's how they regulate the internal chaos that emotional intimacy stirs up. They might not express it outwardly, but inside they're often flooded, heart-racing mind spiraling and feeling a loss of control over the emotional safety they've spent years trying to maintain. So they default to what they've always done: shut down, avoid, disconnect. This silence, this distance isn't just about space, it's about safety. And to the avoidant, safety comes from control. From minimizing exposure, from creating emotional distance so they don't have to feel too much, reveal too much, or risk getting hurt. Ironically, it's when they feel most connected that they often become most scared. Because connection demands presence. It demands vulnerability. And for someone with an avoidant attachment style, that can feel like walking straight into the line of fire. So what looks like indifference is actually fear. What looks like coldness is often overwhelm. And what feels like rejection may heartbreakingly be the only way they know how to stay emotionally afloat. That doesn't make the behavior okay. It doesn't mean you should tolerate emotional shutdowns or excuse the impact of their withdrawal. But it does mean you can stop personalizing it. Their distance isn't about your value, it's about their wiring, their trauma, their unresolved fear. When you stop seeing their silence as a reflection of your worth, you start reclaiming your power. You stop chasing. You stop explaining. And instead you begin to observe with compassion and boundaries. You can acknowledge this person is scared, but I don't have to be. You can hold space for your own feelings without trying to manage theirs. Because here's the truth: avoidants can learn to stay. They can grow, but only if they become aware of these patterns and choose to do the emotional work. That's their responsibility, not yours. Your role isn't to coax them back. It's to recognize the pattern and decide whether this person can meet you in the kind of love you deserve. So the next time an avoidant withdraws after a moment of connection, remember this. It might feel like they're rejecting you, but what they're actually rejecting is the emotional risk of being seen. And you were simply the mirror that made that exposure unavoidable. Let them go if they can't stay. And let that not be a reflection of your worth, but a redirection toward the secure love you're meant for. When we think of love, we often imagine words of affirmation, constant closeness, and emotional transparency. But not everyone expresses love in ways that are direct or verbal. For avoidantly attached individuals, love doesn't come out in "I miss you" or "let's talk about our feelings." It comes out sideways, quietly, subtly, and often in confusing or contradictory ways. Avoidants have learned to equate emotional vulnerability with danger, so when they care, they rarely say it outright. Instead, they show it through behaviors that often go unnoticed or are misread as disinterest. Understanding these expressions doesn't mean excusing their inability to connect emotionally, but it does give us insight into the way they do love, even if that love is hidden behind a wall. Silent observation is one of the earliest signs of avoidant affection. While they may seem detached on the surface, avoidants are often highly attuned to their partner's behaviors, moods, and even small changes in tone or rhythm. This hypervigilance is a survival skill. They're scanning for emotional cues, trying to anticipate what's coming, and seeking connection in a way that doesn't require them to risk being exposed. You might notice they remember tiny details about your habits or fixate on things you didn't even realize you revealed. It's not control, it's their version of closeness. Watching is safer than engaging. Testing boundaries is another way avoidants inadvertently reveal their fear of love and loss. They may delay responses, pull back after intimacy, or seem to withdraw just when things are getting good. To you, it may feel like rejection, but to them, it's a subconscious test. Will you stay if I step away? Will you still want me if I make it hard? This isn't manipulation, it's self-protection. They've learned to question the reliability of closeness, so they create distance to see if you'll close the gap. Sadly, many anxious partners chase confirming the avoidance fear that love comes with pressure. A secure response, however, is not to chase, but to stay grounded in your own boundaries. One of the most telling avoidant expressions of love is showing up in crisis. While they may struggle with consistency, avoidants often override their fear-based wiring when someone they care about is in real pain. If you've ever had an avoidant ex suddenly reach out when you were grieving sick or facing a difficult time that's not random, that's love slipping through the cracks in their defenses. In those moments, their need to protect or support outweighs their fear of emotional vulnerability. It's raw, it's primal, and while they may disappear again afterward, it's one of the clearest signals that they do care, even if they don't know how to show up consistently. Another quiet form of affection is supporting your independence. Avoidants often express love by stepping back, not out of rejection, but respect. They won't hover or micromanage. They'll encourage your autonomy, cheer for your goals from a distance, and give you the space they themselves need. In their mind, love shouldn't feel like entrapment. It should breathe. So, if you've ever had a partner who was avoidant but deeply respected your need for space, your ambitions, your alone time, that was likely their way of saying, I love you enough not to need you to need me. It may not look like closeness, but to them, it's one of the highest forms of care. Lastly, quiet acts of service are the avoidant's safest pathway to show affection. They may not verbalize their love, but they'll fix your leaky faucet, pick up your favorite snack, or remember something you mentioned in passing. These actions are deliberate but not showy. Avoidants feel most comfortable demonstrating love through tangible, low-risk gestures. Not because they don't feel more, but because this is what feels emotionally manageable. It's their way of being close without opening their heart too far. It's what they can offer even when they're scared to offer more. And this is where it gets tender. Just because an avoidant shows love differently doesn't mean that love is always enough, especially if you need deeper emotional connection. It's okay to appreciate the ways they show they care and to still honor your own need for reciprocity, consistency, and emotional availability. You can acknowledge their effort without lowering your standards, because love that hides behind walls, no matter how genuine, still keeps you locked out. So if you're in love with someone avoidant, take note of these subtle signals, but don't build your self-worth around them. Let them inform your understanding, not define your worth. And remember, love should feel safe, clear, and mutual. Anything less, even if it's well-intentioned, isn't sustainable. One of the most painful experiences in loving someone with an avoidant attachment style is the feeling of being emotionally abandoned while still sensing there was something real underneath. You could feel it. The warmth was there, subtle, fleeting, but undeniable. And yet the behavior didn't match. They disappeared after closeness. They pulled away when things got good. They grew cold after intimacy. It's confusing. It feels personal, and naturally your mind goes to the most painful place. Maybe they just didn't love me. But here's the shift that changes everything. Avoidant behavior often isn't a lack of love. It's the way that love shows up when someone is afraid to feel it. Their silence, distance, and inconsistency don't mean they didn't care. In fact, sometimes they mean they cared more than they were capable of handling. Avoidant love is a paradox. It burns slowly, cautiously, and in secret. It lives in the spaces between their words. It peeks out in tiny gestures, then retreats again. It's shaped not by freedom, but by fear. Not by disinterest, but by the protective instinct that says, if I get too close, I'll get hurt, or worse, I'll hurt them. Most avoidantly attached people were never taught that emotions are safe. Many grew up with caregivers who were physically present but emotionally unavailable, homes where feelings were dismissed. Vulnerability was ignored, or independence was valued over intimacy. So they learned early on, needing people is dangerous. And as adults, they continue to guard themselves against emotional dependency. That doesn't mean they don't feel. It means they don't know what to do with what they feel, especially when it's strong. That's why their love can look like distance. It's why they vanish just when you start to trust them. It's why a deep, vulnerable moment is sometimes followed by silence. It's not because it meant nothing. It's because it meant too much. And their internal system floods with fear they've spent a lifetime managing through emotional withdrawal. When you understand this, when you reframe avoidant behavior through the lens of trauma and protection, you stop personalizing it. You stop thinking, I wasn't enough, and start realizing this person has an unresolved wound they don't yet know how to hold. Now, let's be clear. Reframing is not romanticizing. Understanding where their behavior comes from does not mean tolerating it. You can hold compassion for someone's pain without letting it cause harm to yours. But the reframe matters because it frees you from the shame spiral. It helps you realize that their silence isn't proof of your unworthiness. It's a reflection of their emotional threshold being exceeded. Think of their withdrawal like a nervous system shutting down, not a punishment, but a coping mechanism. In those moments, they're not evaluating you, they're managing them. And the more they care, the more vulnerable they feel. So paradoxically, their love makes them act in ways that feel unloving. That's the cruel irony of avoidant attachment. Sometimes their deepest gesture of love isn't, I miss you, it's showing up quietly when you're hurting. It's remembering your favorite song. It's fixing something you never asked them to fix. It's a long pause before answering your question, not because they don't care, but because they're terrified of saying the wrong thing and being seen too deeply. This doesn't mean the relationship will work. Avoidant love, unless actively healed, is inconsistent, hard to rely on, and emotionally lonely for the partner on the receiving end. But when you recognize what their behavior really means, you stop trying to earn their love through over-functioning. You stop chasing clarity in people who can barely give it to themselves. And you start asking better questions. Can I be with someone who loves this way? Does this dynamic feel safe for me? Am I honoring my needs while trying to understand theirs? When you reframe their withdrawal not as rejection, but as protection, you take your power back. You stop translating silence as I'm not enough and start seeing it as they're not ready. And when someone's not ready, the most loving thing you can do for both of you is step back. Because love should feel clear. Love should feel consistent. And love at its best doesn't have to hide behind fear. Understanding that avoidant love is still love may bring peace to your heart. But remembering that you deserve more than secret love, that's what brings peace to your life. Let's be honest. Loving someone with an avoidant attachment style isn't easy. It requires emotional maturity, patience, and an ability to not personalize behaviors that feel deeply personal. But if you've chosen to stay in connection with someone avoidant, or if you are the avoidant, there are important lessons on both sides that can make or break the relationship. For the partner, loving an avoidant. The first and hardest truth is this: you cannot force emotional intimacy out of someone who isn't ready to give it. You cannot text, talk, or love your way through someone else's defenses. But what you can do is begin to notice how love shows up differently. Avoidants rarely offer love in bold declarations or grand romantic gestures. Instead, they love quietly, through observation, through showing up when it matters most, through giving you space when you didn't even ask for it. This is where your emotional maturity comes in, not to tolerate crumbs, but to recognize what's genuine without constantly needing it to look the way it does in movies. Your task isn't to fix them or prove you're worthy of their closeness. It's to stay rooted in your own boundaries while holding space for their wiring. That means you respect their need for space, but not at the cost of your own emotional needs. You stay patient, but not passive. You don't take their silence as rejection, but you do notice how it affects your well-being. And if over time their version of love feels like a one-way street, you give yourself permission to walk away without guilt. Being in a relationship with an avoidant requires a deep balance of compassion and clarity. You have to be emotionally resilient enough not to chase and secure enough not to collapse when they pull away. And you need to remember, love without consistency will always starve the anxious heart. For the avoidant partner, this is your invitation to stop hiding behind the idea that you just need space and start asking why closeness feels unsafe in the first place. It's not your fault that you learn to protect yourself, but it is your responsibility to learn how to connect if what you truly want is intimacy. The people who love you are not trying to trap you. They're trying to understand you. They're trying to stand beside you while you learn a new language, one of vulnerability, presence, and emotional reciprocity. Avoidance isn't just about independence, it's about fear. Fear of being seen. Fear of needing someone and being disappointed. Fear that if someone really gets close, they'll discover the parts of you you're not proud of. But here's the truth. The deeper bond you crave will never come without risk. And the love you say you want will always stay just out of reach if you keep running every time someone gets close. Healing your attachment wounds means doing the exact opposite of what your nervous system is screaming for. It means staying when you want to bolt. It means speaking when silence feels safer. It means letting someone love the parts of you that feel unlovable. If you're avoidant, you don't need to become someone else. But you do need to become someone braver, someone who can sit with discomfort long enough to build trust, not just expect it. For both sides, the balance between space and closeness. The most successful relationships involving avoidance don't happen because one person sacrifices all their needs or because the avoidant changes overnight. They work because both partners learn to respect autonomy without fearing abandonment. This means creating space, but not silence. It means encouraging independence, but staying emotionally available. It means trusting that love doesn't mean engulfment and space doesn't mean disconnection. The avoidant learns that they can need and be needed without losing themselves. And the partner learns that needing connection doesn't make them needy. When both people commit to emotional responsibility, the dynamic shifts. Love stops being a survival strategy and becomes a shared experience. Boundaries stop feeling like barriers and start becoming bridges. And suddenly both people feel freer, not because they've avoided closeness, but because they've built it without losing themselves. We live in a world that teaches us love should be loud, that it should arrive like fireworks, bold declarations, daily affirmations, sweeping gestures. The louder, the more constant, the more obvious, the more real. And yet not all love comes dressed in spectacle. Some love walks quietly, says little and does not rush to explain itself. Some love waits behind walls, unsure of how to step forward without being consumed. And that's where avoidant love challenges us both philosophically and emotionally. Avoidantly attached individuals, for all their challenges, offer a completely different picture of love than the one we're conditioned to want. Their love is rarely verbal. It's not emotionally fluent. It doesn't promise forever or demand immediate closeness. Instead, it's cautious, measured, often expressed through presence more than words and action more than emotion. And while that can be confusing or painful, it also offers a deeper truth. Love does not need to be constant or expressive to be sincere. In avoidant love, we see a kind of tenderness that isn't about possession, it's about respect. A love that says, I won't cling to you because I know how important your space is. I care enough not to control you. This, in its own way, is intimacy. Not the fusion kind, but the kind built on autonomy, where closeness doesn't erase individuality, but coexists with it. We tend to idolize relationships where two people become one. But avoidant love reminds us that true connection doesn't require the loss of self. In fact, when it's rooted in health, it honors individuality above all else. It says, I'll walk beside you, not ahead of you, not pulling you along, but beside you as two whole people choosing to be together, not to complete each other, but to witness each other. Of course, when avoidant love becomes imbalanced, when it becomes withdrawal, without communication distance, without return space, without security, it hurts. And it's valid to want more, to need clarity, to desire emotional consistency. But it's also powerful to realize that love's volume doesn't define its value. Some of the most profound expressions of care aren't loud, they're just deeply true. It's the partner who doesn't say I love you often, but shows up the moment your world falls apart. It's the person who doesn't do romantic grand gestures, but quietly fixes your broken tire, remembers how you like your coffee, or gives you the silence you didn't know you needed. It's the partner who might struggle with vulnerability, but always notices when you're overwhelmed and softens their energy just enough so you can breathe again. These acts may not look like movie love, but they are real. And in a world filled with performative affection, there's something sacred about love that doesn't need an audience. Love that is expressed not through words, but through carefully chosen presence. That said, the lesson isn't to settle for inconsistency or excuse emotional absence. Not all avoidant behavior is loving. And many avoidant individuals still need to do deep work to recognize how their fear of closeness impacts those who try to love them. But the deeper truth is, this love comes in many languages. And one of the hardest, most liberating things we can do is stop demanding that someone love us in our language and start asking if their version of love is something we can live with, something we can trust, something that aligns with our emotional needs. Avoidant love teaches us to get curious, to slow down, to listen not just to words but to patterns, to stop chasing intensity and start asking for honesty. It invites us to reconsider what we've been taught about romance and to define love not just as fireworks but as firewood. Quiet, stable, sustaining, the kind of warmth that stays. So maybe love isn't always loud. Maybe it's not always linear. Maybe it doesn't always come wrapped in certainty. But maybe, just maybe, the love that grows slowly, the one that respects your space, shows up in storms, and never demands your surrender, is worth noticing. And maybe if we learn to see clearly and love ourselves first, we can recognize when that quiet love is real. And when it's simply fear in disguise, love is rarely simple. And when it involves someone with an avoidant attachment style, it can feel like a maze, intense moments of connection, followed by emotional walls you can't explain. One minute you're seen, the next you're alone in the silence, trying to make sense of what just happened. But as we've explored together, this withdrawal isn't always what it seems. It's not coldness. It's not indifference. In many cases, it's something far more human. It's fear. Not of you, but of the feelings you evoke. For many avoidants, closeness doesn't bring comfort. It triggers alarm. That instinct to pull away isn't a sign that they don't care. It's a defense mechanism one formed in childhood when vulnerability wasn't safe, and love often felt conditional. When an avoidant cares, they often don't say it. They show it in ways you have to learn to notice, in the way they quietly observe you, in how they test distance not to punish you, but to protect themselves, in how they show up when everything's falling apart, even if they disappear again once the crisis is over, in the way they encourage your independence, not because they don't want closeness, but because they fear losing themselves in it. For partners, this kind of love can feel confusing, painful, incomplete, but the truth is, chasing or demanding love in your language won't change how they express it. It will only exhaust you. What will make a difference is clarity, boundaries, patience without self-abandonment, the ability to hold space for their process without losing yourself in it. Because your job isn't to prove you're worthy of their love. Your job is to know that you are, and to decide if their version of love is one that can meet you, sustain you, and honor you in return. And for avoidants reading this, your love matters. But it can't stay buried under silence and distance if you want true connection. To love fully, you'll have to face the very thing you fear: intimacy, vulnerability, the terrifying act of being seen and letting someone stay. And yes, it's uncomfortable, but running from closeness only deepens the loneliness you've spent years protecting yourself from. The most profound love stories don't always begin with ease. Some begin with fear, with mistrust, with a slow unraveling of years of emotional armor. But for those willing to do the work on both sides, love can become something more than just survival. It can become safety. It can become home. So here's what you take with you. Avoidant withdrawal is often a sign of emotional flooding, not a lack of love. Their love, though quiet, is real. It lives in their actions, not always in their words. Your self-worth isn't defined by their ability to express affection. Love should never cost you your peace, your identity, or your voice. A healthy relationship honors both freedom and connection. It invites both people to be whole together. If you're loving an avoidant, love them gently, but never forget to love yourself louder. Let their healing be their responsibility. Let your healing be your priority. You don't have to become smaller to keep someone afraid of closeness. And if you are the avoidant, know this. Your fear is valid, but your growth is possible. You can learn to stay, to speak, to let love reach the places you thought were unlovable. Love is not always loud, it's not always obvious, but it can be deeply real even when it's quiet, even when it hides behind fear. The key is learning to recognize it, nurture it, and meet it with courage, not compromise. Thank you for walking through this with me. I'm Jim Rohn, and if this message resonated with you, I invite you to subscribe, leave a comment, and share your experience. Your story matters, your healing matters, and there's a version of love, secure, mutual, lasting, that you are absolutely worthy of. Let's keep growing together.